like we said at the end of the last video, we still need to make sure that our users are informed about the submission process. So during that 15 to 30 second waiting period, I want to show our users some element to let them know what's going on. Now we don't have to show them text or something like that. We don't have to show them some big long information message. All we really need is some little element to let them know, hey, just hold on for a second, we're doing something for you right now. And so I think that could be as simple as a little loading spinner that we place on our button. Fortunately, the Semantic UI library makes it really easy to show a spinner on a button, which is pretty much exactly what we need. So let's look at the documentation around this button tag and see what we can do with it. Back at the documentation, I'll find the elements section, and then I'll go to the button tag documentation. I'm going to scroll down a little bit until the right-hand navigation bar pops up. So here it is right here. Underneath the states section, I'm going to go to loading. And yeah, this is definitely exactly what we need. So we're going to say that whenever a user clicks on that button and starts the transaction submittal process, we should show a little spinner just to say, hey, we're doing it. Give us a minute for this to complete. So let's look at how to do this. Essentially, all we have to do is pass in an additional prop to the button of loading. And once that's in there, the spinner should appear. So I think that sounds pretty easy. Let's give it a shot. Now maybe showing the spinner is easy, but just to clarify, we still need to figure out some way to decide exactly when we want to show the spinner. If we look at our submit function right here, chances are that we're going to want to show a spinner like right before we start accessing Web3 right here. So the instant that a user clicks on this thing, we're going to start running all this code. And as soon as that happens, we probably want to pop that spinner up. And then only after we either throw an error or essentially finish with this entire block of code right here, do we want to remove that spinner. So I think that what we can do here is add an additional property to our state object. We can update that state property as soon as we enter this function, and then as soon as we exit the function, we can then update it again and flip that kind of loading flag over to the reverse of whatever it is. So let's add on a new property to our state object up here. We'll add on a new property called loading, and we'll default it to be false. So by default, we're not doing any loading whatsoever. Then whenever the loading process starts, which is indicated by our submit function right here running, we'll say this dot set state loading true. So as soon as the user clicks on that button, we're going to automatically start the spinner up. And then after all this code is completed, so after the transaction is successfully completed on the network, we can then resolve the spinner and we can turn it back off. And we'll do that by saying this dot set state loading is false down here at the bottom. So now that we've got this kind of flag to tell us whether or not we are currently submitting a transaction, we can use it on our button tag down at the bottom. So back down on our button, we'll add on a new property of loading, and the value for this flag will be determined by this .state.loading, like so. All right, let's give this a shot. So back over inside of our application, I'm going to do a hard refresh, and then I'll go ahead and click on create. Now the instant I click on create, you'll notice that we get that really nice looking spinner. And then again, I'm not going to go through the entire process of submitting the transaction right now. I'm going to go with reject again. But when I click reject, you'll notice that the button resolves back to its original state. And a user can then attempt to do another submittal here. So if they click create again, the spinner starts back up. Okay, so I think that's pretty much exactly what we want. Now you might be thinking, well, why are we showing the spinner before the user confirms the transaction? Well, I think this really is appropriate, right? As soon as the user clicks on submit, we want to make it 100% clear that they need to go deal with MetaMask. So until you deal with this window right here, I don't want you to be able to submit the form again. I don't want you to be able to click this button multiple times and have multiple confirm windows appear. We definitely don't want that to happen. So I think it's entirely appropriate that the button starts spinning as soon as the notification window appears. Now there's one other quick thing I want to mention very quickly here about this error handling message we have. You'll notice that when we click submit right here, or we click create, the error message doesn't really go away. So unfortunately, our users might get into a state where they think that they are just perpetually doing something wrong. We can easily fix that by modifying our setState call back inside of our onSubmit function. So right here at the very top, we can say that as soon as a user tries to submit this thing again, we could clear out that error message. So if something goes wrong during the next submission process, they might get a new message and understand like, oh, okay, like this is a new error that I need to deal with. So we can say error message is empty string like so. All right, so let's now test this full flow out. I'm gonna make sure I reject all these pending transactions. I'm gonna close the notification window and refresh the page. So now if I enter in a minimum contribution of 100 and click on create, okay, we get the spinner, the window pops up, and I can click reject. And then it very clearly tells me exactly what went wrong. And then if I click create again, you'll notice that that error message goes away, which is exactly what we want. Because if now something goes wrong again, it can be really clear to the user, oh, something went wrong a second time. All right, so this is feeling pretty good. Cool. Now you might be thinking, yeah, that's it. We handled everything around the form. We're done. Well, not quite. There's still one last little thing that I want to mention. So let's take a quick break right here. We're going to come back to the next video and we're going to talk about one additional little aspect of this form that we're going to address. And I'm sure you're tired of this form, but trust me, this last feature is a really, really good one that we definitely want to have in Ethereum application. So let's talk about what that last piece is in the next video.